Alrighty, hello and welcome to this Buffer Fireside chat on how to grow on Threads. My name is Kirsti Lang and I'm a content writer at Buffer. With me is Etienne Blanc, product marketing manager for Threads. He's been at Meta for a while and has been part of what was initially a very small team building Threads from quite early on. In his role, he serves as the bridge from the market to product, so shaping what the team builds, and from product back to the market. So there are a few people who understand the intricacies of the platform quite like Etienne does. Etienne, thank you for making the time to chat with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Before we dig in, I just want to let everyone know, as I mentioned at the start, that we will have a Q&A section at the end. So feel free to drop any questions you might have in the chat and we'll get to as many as possible after the fact. We have people from all over the world. This is so cool. Yorkshire, New York, Denver, Vancouver, Austin. Okay, this is very, very cool. Speaking of New York, Etienne, you are based in New York, but you are also attending a very exciting event at the moment. Can you share a little bit about what is going on currently for the Threads team?
Yeah, I mean, like as some of you might have noticed with some fun activations in the app, some party hats here and there. It's Thread's first birthday, and so we're kind of like getting together with the team to reflect on the past year and really think about what's coming next. So very exciting time to meet with the team and be all together in New York.
Yeah, that must be an incredible experience. This year has probably been absolutely wild for you. I wanna rewind a little bit and go back to the inception of Threads in 2023. Meta clearly saw a big opportunity on the market and was able to jump on it at lightning speed. Can you share a little bit about how that happened and how did that even begin?
Yeah, so essentially, I think early 2023, a small team of engineers got together and really started working on an idea for a new app, which is not something that happens all the time here at Meta, but they really kind of saw a clear opportunity in the space of public discussion and conversation, and realized that people were looking for more choices than what was available out there and in the markets. Public conversation, I think, in nature is not something that should be owned by one single company. And so that's really what triggered them to work and start creating a place where people feel comfortable sharing their thoughts, their ideas, and really with the belief that everyone has something valuable to say. Um, One interesting thing as well in terms of like how it started with that very small, nimble team is again like the environment was akin to a startup in a way, like was very small team as I mentioned, and also they really built with what was already existing and didn't build from
Mm.
scratch, but leveraged the Instagram's tech stack from like data models, business logic, security features, and the existing server infrastructure, and that's kind of like what really enabled the team to scale Threads really fast.
Yeah, and it did seem to happen at lightning speed. I think what was the number? I was just refreshing my memory on the launch last year, which I remember very clearly because I was very excited about the new platform. I think I was like one of the first people to sign up, and I was really lucky because I had it available in South Africa on the day of launch, unlike my friends in Europe. Who are now on the platform, thankfully. But Etienne, what was it? I think it was 100,000 signups within the first 100 million, sorry, 100 million signups within the
It's
first few
huge.
days.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, I know. It's
Yeah,
already a huge number.
yeah, it was technically like the most successful app launch of all time. We had 100 million signups in just 5 days. And it kept growing from there. I mean, like we've announced last week, and Mark Zuckerberg announced that we now have 175 million monthly active users on the platform, and that number has grown since we launched. Obviously, to get to that level, we're really happy about it. We're also very grateful and humble when we look at these numbers because there's just so much more that we can and want to do. And so the team is really kind of like working hard right now to kind of keep the community growing.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think at the rate at which your team is rolling out new features and kind of adding to the experience, I love the birthday icons. I've had such an amazing time scratching out those little things. If you haven't tried it yet, it's available on the Threads app. And yet there are a whole bunch of new icons that have been revealed for Threads birthday, which is so fun. My favorite is the pink one. If anybody else has seen these, do share in the chat.
The pink one right now too, so it's a cool one.
Yeah, it is. Okay, before I get carried away about icons, let's get into the meat of our chat today. I think the question folks ask more often than not that we see at Buffer about social platforms is about the algorithm. So how does the algorithm work? How can I get my content in front of as many eyes as possible? How can I get the reach that I feel like I deserve? So Etienne, can you share a little bit about this? How does the Threads algorithm work?
Yeah, I mean, at a high level, it's pretty similar to how it works on Instagram. So if you look at the For You feed, you're going to see content coming both from accounts you follow and recommendations. And what you see in the For You feed is personalized to you based on a number of signals. There are a lot, so I'm not going to share all of them, but there are obviously like accounts and posts you have interacted with in the past that tell us that obviously you're interested in a given topic or in a given account. There is also, and it takes into account interactions from both Threads and Instagram. So that's important to understand. And then we consider factors such as how recent the post is and how many interactions it has received.
Okay, so what I did want to kind of pull on, I know you said there are 1,000 signals, thousands of signals that impact where your content is shared. But recently I watched a fascinating interview with Adam Mosseri, who was talking a little bit about how sends per reach are one of the most important factors to look at for the Instagram algorithm in determining the success of your content. Is there a single kind of signal that you could advise people aim for on Threads, or is it more complicated than that?
Not really. I think at this point, one thing that, I mean, we're probably going to touch on that later in the discussion, but I think one of the things that's really important as well is like replies. So not only thinking about like what you post and like does it cater to your community, but also engaging in conversations with your community and like really engaging in replies. I think it's if not as important as posting in the first place, maybe even more important.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. And I think it aligns with what you are trying to do with Instagram as well. And that kind of you want to be content to be seen to be starting conversations. So whether that happens in DMs or whether that happens in the comments, I think obviously in threads it happens a little bit more publicly, but that's really interesting to see how that crossover works. So another thing that I wanted to ask about, and it's a question we get asked a lot at Buffer as well. Let's talk about posting consistency. What would you recommend? Is there an ideal amount of times per day or per week to post, or is it more complicated than that?
Yeah, I think it's a bit more complicated, and so I'm not gonna share a number or even a range because it really depends on a number of
Yeah.
factors. But I think generally the guidance is that it's all about keeping the conversation going, right? And there are two ways I think to do that. It's sharing regularly, like posting your thoughts, your everyday thoughts, and like regularly doing that. But also, again, like engaging with your community. There are numbers of ways to do that. I mentioned replies as one way to do it, but obviously quote posting and like giving a commentary on something that you see on the platform, using tagging topics to increase your discoverability, or using polls as well, just like to ask your community questions and get answers in a poll format are ways to do that. So I think that's kind of the thing, right? It's more about being consistent in your like content posting and engagement on the platform rather than just a pure number and trying to kind of stick to it.
Yeah, okay, that's great advice. And I love the idea of kind of keeping the conversation going because that's not something that I see a lot of creators and brands prioritizing on other social platforms. I think the idea of posting and ghosting is really prevalent at the moment, and people are kind of just, chasing the next piece of content, the next piece of content. Whereas on Threads, you can kind of nurture your content and reply to comments and keep the conversation going. So it's not a case of, oh, I need something new to post today. It's a case of there's a conversation that I need to reply to today, which is really interesting and quite unique, I think, on social. Yeah. Okay, Etienne, you've touched on this already, but Threads and Instagram obviously are partner apps and they work seamlessly together. I've seen a lot of creators talk about getting active on Threads in the hope of boosting their engagement or their following and reach on Instagram. Does activity on Threads. Does activity on Threads have any bearing on the Instagram algorithm and vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that like the activity on Instagram does impact what you can see on Threads, but without going into too much detail on the algorithm, I think again, like going back to the point that both apps are basically very much kind of linked together.
Mm,
Way we've built it is that it's very easy for people to toggle between Threads and Instagram profiles, which made it to people who discover you on Threads to follow you on Instagram and vice versa. So that's one. Second, I think there are places on Instagram and on Facebook where we suggest Threads content.
mm,
We call them units in feed. And basically, if you're creating content publicly on Threads, you may appear in these feeds on Facebook and on Instagram, and that allows people to discover your Threads account as well, and then your Instagram potentially. So that's that's how it's kind of all linked together. And the consequence of that is, in terms of like how we recommend you to approach this, is really try giving people a reason to follow you on both platforms.
mm,
And that means really creating unique, original content that draws them in. You'll have the opportunity, and some people do that, to cross-post content from Instagram or even Facebook directly to Threads. But it shouldn't be your entire content strategy. You should be intentional about like what you cross-post,
mm.
why, jump in the replies, give your Threads audience a compelling reason to keep engaging. The way I see it, like for instance, even if you create a reel on Instagram and you want to share it to Threads, you should probably like give commentary that is not available on Threads, or like give your own take, or ask your audience a question and then engage with them in the replies.
I like that. So maybe you could kind of view Threads as, I mean, this is just an example, but Threads is your behind the scenes. This is what went into making this reel. And oh, these are the outtakes, these are the bloopers. And on Instagram is your, aesthetic, polished, finished product. That's great advice. Okay, tapping a little bit further into this, what advice would you give a creator who is looking to build their following on Threads?
Okay, so I have a lot of advice. So it's the first one is really try sparking conversations by sharing your ideas, your everyday thoughts. We talked about consistency and like just being very casual and sharing your thoughts. I think that's a very
Mm,
important component of the platform, but also ask other people to weigh in and basically react and give their opinion on this. So that's one. To chime in on conversations about cultural moments, pop culture, and current events. I mean, whether this is like talking about the Euros and like the game between France and Spain when it happens, or about the Met Gala, or like any kind of event that happens in your community and that is important, I think it's important to jump on timely moments where like a lot of discussion is happening, give your own take, own perspective on thing, and just like engage in that conversation. Um, I mentioned that earlier, but engaging with your audience in the replies of your threads is very important,
yeah.
just as joining existing conversations by replying to others' threads. Again, I'll just pause on this again because I think this is really important. It's a public conversation app, and it's not only about like top level posts, it's also about like really replies and jumping in replies. And this might even be even more important in terms of like building community than posting in the first place.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
a lot of sense.
a bit more tactical, I would say, is just using topic tags, just because it really enables you to get discovered. So say I use the Euros example and Euros 2024 topic tag, like people who search for that and tap on the tag on another post might end up on your post and like or comment your post. So that's a bit of a tactical one, but important. And the last advice I would say is really experiment with different content formats. Obviously, Threads is a text first kind of app, but it also has like a lot of options in terms of what you can share on the platform.
Mm.
So you can really experiment with photos, with videos, polls, GIFs, or even voice threads. I know that some of these features are not available on via the API and so via Buffer, but just know that like we're working with our partners and the team at Buffer to kind of see where it makes sense to bring parity with the app.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I am very intimidated by voice threads in particular. I think it's
Yeah,
maybe like it's a
it's
fear
not
of,
for everyone. It's
yeah,
not for everyone, but sometimes it works really well.
yeah. I'd love to see more people adopting that feature and see how they use it. Okay. So are there any creators that are doing these things particularly well? If you can think of some folks we should be watching.
Yeah, maybe two examples that I like personally. Simuli, who is an actor and a creator, is very active on the platform. I mean, he's kind of applying all of these principles of engaging with the audience. He's done
Hmm.
great ask me anything type of conversation, but he's also kind of sharing daily thoughts or takes. Like like basically shared a video last week of him playing with two cans of Coke at the lounge at the airport. It's very light, very kind of engaging content. So really like that. And another one which I quite liked is All Loser in Brooklyn. It's a fashion, I would say, commentator, and like she gives her kind of spicy takes on basically fashion shows and really engages again with polls, with direct questions. For instance, during the Met Gala, with our community to know like who's the star of the Met Gala or like hot takes on specific kind of moments. And that's really something we like to see.
Okay, that's good to know. I will, Etienne, at the end of the conversation, I will ask you to drop these names in the chat so folks can, if you wouldn't mind, so folks can follow them. Or Tammy and Mitra, my wonderful content team comrades, if you could find these folks on Threads and share the link while Etienne and I chat, that would be great. I'm sure a lot of folks would like to check out their content while we talk. Okay, so let's flip the script a little bit and talk about brands and their success on Threads. Should they be doing anything different to the advice you've offered?
Not really. I think in principle, the same advice and best practices would apply for brands.
Mm-hmm.
The key characteristic in terms of the content that they should post is very similar, meaning unique and original content, very authentic, and very often we see that working, but like casual kind of type of content that's conversation driving and that's timely and like appropriate at the time when they post it. So I think very similar. And maybe I can give a couple of examples as well of like of
Yeah,
brands
please
that
do.
that work really well. I mean, like I'm a runner myself, and I have Hoka shoes, so I checked out their threads, and it's actually a very good mix of promoting kind of their athletes and their partners and events that they organize, but also very lightweight kind of pop culture memes or
Mm.
questions to their audience. Again, via polls or not, but around like what are the key advice that you get as a runner or that are really contributing to the community. So that's one example. Wendy's is one that we very often because they're really kind of cracking us up and they're really funny and really engaging content. And I would not do my job properly if I didn't objectively and without any bias mention at Threads, our own kind of Threads account, which is actually applying all these best practices in very different ways, like really experimenting with different formats,
Mm.
kind of looking at the numbers and seeing what works, and engaging with the community in a very direct and kind of humane way. So kudos to them. But maybe the last point that I would add, and that goes for both creators and brands, that there's not one winning strategy
Mm.
generally. I think like I'm sure everyone on the call like knows on the webinar knows that very well in the world of social media. But for Threads specifically, I would say do not overthink. Experiment, try different things, and see what resonates with your audience. We also released insights as part of the API, and it's available in Buffer, as far as I know. And so really leverage that to see what works, what resonates, and then adapt your approach if it doesn't.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think of all kind of social platforms, and I don't know that if that's just because my audience is less established, but it feels so much safer to experiment on Threads because, and we always kind of chat at Buffer. I don't know if this is the way that the algorithm is serving the content to us, but we feel as though the space is a little bit more wholesome at the moment, a little bit less critical, a little bit, yeah. So just my take. I'd love to hear if anyone in the chat feels similarly about Threads and
Yeah,
experimentation on there.
and I think that's one of the key characteristics of the platform. I mean, like
Mm.
I kind of, I think I assume that everyone on the call knows what Threads is and so
Yes,
on.
and
But
we should have done this from the get-go. I was thinking as we were digging deep into the algorithm, I wondered if folks who are maybe kind of new to Threads and they don't know what the platform is, yeah, please, if you could just explain
yeah,
what it is.
take a step back and just in case we're talking about a very kind of foreign concept since the beginning of this discussion. If you have not heard of it, and I hope you did, because otherwise, like maybe we didn't do our job well. But Threads is a text-first app for sharing updates and joining public conversations. So that's the basics. But one of the key characteristics, and that's why I kind of like went back to that, is that we are really building it in a way where people can tune out the noise. And again, like that's tightly related to the fact that it was built by the team at Instagram, and we can kind of reuse a lot of the safety integrity features that are already available there. But we're really kind of trying to make sure we enable positive and productive conversations. So making it really a healthy um, place and space for kind of public discussion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Instagram guidelines, are what you should be looking to make sure that you are, meeting all the
Yeah,
expectations and getting active on threads. Yeah.
yeah, the community guidelines are pretty much the same as far as I know.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. That is good to know. Okay. So we're going to zoom back in again and go maybe to intermediate advanced threads users. What are your plans for monetization for creators, if any?
Yes. So at this time, there are no ads on Threads and limited monetization features, I would say. And the reason for that is that our priority is to build consumer value first and foremost, which then allows us ultimately to explore how to build business value in a way that really doesn't compromise the consumer experience and creator experience as well, ultimately. I say limited monetization capabilities because last year we introduced a basic paid partnership tool, which really just allows you to kind of disclose paid partnership. So you can kind of like monetize your audience in that way, but it's still quite limited. Again, like that's very important to us, but we are trying to do it in a thoughtful and timely manner.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, that is great to know. Thank you. Another slightly more advanced question, Threads and the Fediverse. I would love to learn a little bit more about the decision to connect Threads to the Fediverse right from the get-go. But maybe let's not repeat my mistake from the beginning. Let's talk about what the Fediverse is for folks who may not have heard of it before.
Yeah, sure. I mean, good idea because it
It's
can be a bit
complicated.
complex and something that we've hearing about more recently, but
Hmm.
zooming back a little bit and explaining what this is. So the actual definition of the Fediverse is essentially see it as a network of interconnected servers, like social media servers from all over the world. Each server is kind of an independent platform with its own users, its own content, its own rules, and they share information with each other to enable people to connect and discover new things across the Fediverse. So that's kind of the more nebulous, maybe, definition. One thing that's important is I mentioned independent social media servers. Meta doesn't own the Fediverse. It's not a Meta-owned concept. Threads is just one of many servers that has joined the Fediverse. It was actually created in the early 2000s with the idea to give people greater connectivity and community, no matter what app they use.
Hmm.
And there are a couple of platforms that are growing as well and that have joined the Fediverse, like Flipboard, Mastodon, PeerTube, and others. But maybe an easier way or simpler way to kind of think about it is with an analogy, and we tend to use email as an analogy. So you can send an email from a Gmail account to a Yahoo account because those services communicate with each other and use the same protocol. That's essentially the same applied to social media, right? So you can post a threads from Threads to the Fediverse, and a person who uses a Mastodon server can follow you and see and interact with your content directly from Mastodon. So that's pretty much the idea. The only notable difference and important difference is that contrary to emails, Fediverse conversations are public and can be shared across servers. So
Okay.
that's one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great explainer. The email analogy really helped me understand things a little bit better because it is such a nebulous concept at the moment. It's kind of difficult to grasp when you're used to, okay, Instagram is over here, TikTok is over here, Threads is over here, but perhaps a little bit easier now that we have seen the way that Facebook and Threads and Instagram kind of integrate and show other content in feed. So I think that's also kind of a good way of looking at it. So why the decision to integrate Threads to the Fediverse right from the beginning?
I mean, it's a very good question, and I think coming back to what I shared earlier, I think we kind of have that belief that public conversation and public discussion shouldn't like just be limited to one single app.
Hmm.
And so there's really kind of this idea of opening up the conversation and really think that the Fediverse will give people more choice when it comes to reaching new audiences, expanding their communities, better discovering ultimately and joining public discussions on topics they care about. Um, so that's the why essentially. And again,
Yeah.
like if you think about the family of apps and like from WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, or Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, like you have very private kind of conversation on the one hand and like very public kind of discussions that are happening on the other end. And so it made sense to also kind of explore how we can make it even more open.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I think Threads kind of becoming part of this network is such an important step for the Fediverse because it is, I mean, this is not the perfect turn of phrase, but it is a more mainstream platform to have done so, and perhaps a little bit more of an accessible platform to folks who aren't used to the idea of servers and decentralized networks. And yeah, so that's something that I'm particularly excited about to see what comes of that. I'm currently sharing my posts to the Threadiverse. I keep saying that the Fediverse I've turned on sharing, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, just add one thing, which is that, I mean, obviously this is complex. This is something
yeah.
that we're trying to approach basically with a phase kind of approach, like step by step, doing that very responsibly and engaging in the process with the Fediverse community, with a bunch of stakeholders to kind of like do that in a way that is positive and help kind of grow the community and the Fediverse overall. And so that's one reason why at the moment posts shared via the API cannot be shared to the Fediverse, but that's something
Yeah.
that we're exploring.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for raising that as well. So that basically means that post, if you schedule a post in Buffer or another scheduling tool, it won't be shared to the Fediverse, but it will obviously go live on Threads. But that's something, as you said, that you were working on.
Yeah, if you have turned on sharing to the
Yes.
Fediverse, um, because if you haven't, like whether you post on Threads or via Buffer, it wouldn't go to the Fediverse anyway. It's an
Yeah,
opt-in.
absolutely. That's also very, very important to clarify. Your posts aren't automatically shared to Mastodon and other Fediverse platforms. You need to opt in. I think that's done in the settings, Etienne, if I'm remembering
Correct.
correctly. It's very easy.
Account
Couple of clicks.
settings. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that is great to know. So, my final question is what is Thread's vision for the future of the social network if all goes according to plan?
Yeah. So I think essentially, and I mentioned that I think when I explained like the origin of Threads in a way.
Origin story.
Exactly. But we really believe that everyone has something valuable to say. And so with Threads, what we want to create is a place where they feel very comfortable sharing it. Um, I think what we want to achieve is have a place where users can connect with people over shared interests, can voice their opinions and different point of views in a healthy way, and engage in conversations with others. Without going so like in depth on that, I think I would really recommend like, and it's another shameless plug after ad threads earlier, but following Mosseri and Zuck on threads and on Instagram because they share regular updates obviously about what's new and like what we're testing and launching, but also commentary around threads and Q&A kind of type of formats where they answer these kind of questions as well as we refine as well kind of the vision
Mm.
and how the platform evolves.
Yeah, and I think so that is Mark Zuckerberg and obviously Adam Mosseri, who are the head of Instagram and what is Mark's title at the moment? CEO of Facebook? Is that or Meta?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're great to follow on Threads as well. And I think they're also a good example of how to use Threads because of how they kind of share things transparently and start conversations and reply to conversations with. I think they're also a great set of accounts to follow. So with that, we've had some questions in the chat, but I see Joanna has been wonderful and answering them all. I think we should chat through them anyway, Etienne, just in case you have anything else to share. So the first question I'm seeing is, does it matter whether I have content with images or without on Threads?
So Mm, no, it doesn't matter, is the short answer. And I hope, because I'm not checking Joanna's answer, but I hope we'll have the same answers. But the answer is no. I mean, like again, this is a text first app, and I think we see a lot of success in people posting just text. So there's no kind of obligation at all to post media. I think it's generally, I think it's good practice to diversify. And
Mm.
also, kind of, if you have visual content, not hesitate to share it and like ask your community what they think about it or to react and so on and so forth. But there's no kind of clear winner, and definitely like it's not a must-have. And so yeah, I would just encourage again like testing different formats because it really depends on your audience as well. I mean, like if you're a photographer and people expect you to kind of share maybe a behind the scene of like when you're sharing pictures, like you might want to kind of share photographs, but obviously like you might also explore how you can kind of just share updates by text and kind of ask questions to people and so on. So no, you don't need to or don't have to post pictures
Mm.
or threads.
Yeah, I've also seen some chatter about how potentially sharing videos and photos or images on Threads may actually perform worse than standard text posts. But if I'm understanding you correctly, that there is no kind of ranking signal in the algorithm that's going to boost images or downrank images like we do
No.
see on some other platforms, right? So it's purely your audience's reaction to that type of content and you figuring out what works for your audience rather than trying to kind of work with the algorithm, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
I don't think we downrank based on the format. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't like suggest that you use it in the first place. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think again it really depends on how the content resonates with the audience.
Okay. And then Chris is asking, how about hashtags? So hashtags work a little bit differently on Threads. Perhaps that's something that we could get into real quick, Etienne. Is they're called tags, and you can only use one per post.
Yeah, so tags are similar to hashtags in practice. They're just a bit more flexible and easier
Mm.
to read. But you can include spaces and special characters like emojis in your tags. You don't need to include the hashtag unless you want to. And basically, tags link to search results that show posts related to the tags. Um, this means like posts that contain the same or similar topic, keyword, or phrase, and not only the posts that include the same exact tag. So that's one thing to know. I mean, I mentioned that earlier, but I think it's good practice to use a tag in your
Mm.
post just because it helps improve discoverability. Meaning that again, like if you're gonna use the Met Gala tag, for instance, during the event, like lots of people are searching this or like clicking on the tag on another post and are gonna potentially end up on your post and be able to engage with it.
Yeah, that's something that I've also realized. I mean, anecdotally on the team, the folks who are very active on Threads have kind of found their niches by using hashtags. So one of my teammates is very active on music threads. Shout out to Brandon. Another one is active on mom threads. I have had wild success with by hashtagging Swifties, Swifties of threads. That's a whole community, and yeah, that's been an enlightening experience for me as well. So tags are very important. I see Joanna is also commenting that in the chat that you should definitely be leveraging tags. Okay, let's see what other questions. Oh, here's an interesting one. Along similar lines, how does the algorithm interact with link sharing posts for an organization trying to spread its original free to access content? So I guess the question comes down to is, are links going to be downranked?
Not as far as I know. So I can follow up on this one, and I don't know if Joanna shared an answer. But as far as I know, you should be able to post a link without it being kind of downranked. I don't think
Mm,
that would work like this. But yeah, unless there are integrity issues potentially with the said link, but if not, I don't see a reason why.
okay, that's good to know. Joanna is echoing your sentiment. It doesn't really matter. It's all about the quality of the content and how well it resonates with the community. I like that a lot. Yeah, I mean, that's a fair question. That's something that we're seeing on a lot of other platforms because they want to keep you on the platform, right? Um, okay. Another question is, and this may be getting super into the weeds, but if you turn off your Fediverse sharing, why does it take 30 days before you can turn it back on? I'm not sure if Etienne will.
Yeah, no, I can tell you why. I think what happens when you turn off Fediverse sharing is essentially we're gonna make a request that your profile and all your posts that you share to the Fediverse are deleted from the Fediverse. And
Mm,
want to make sure that happens smoothly. And so we kind of introduce that buffer in a way to make sure like there is time for the other servers to execute on that, and then you can reactivate. So we didn't want like the two kind of processes to interfere. I don't know if that's going to be the case forever, that there is this 30 days buffer, but yeah, that's how it works for the moment. So it's more a technical aspect to make sure that we respect or like we try as much as we can to kind of make these requests and give time to other servers to execute them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for the insight there. That was a very in the weeds question. What are some of the goals of the Threads API and things that the team would like to see from developers?
Good question. So I think generally, I mean, the goal of Threads is like that we see. I mentioned the vision and what we expect for Threads in the coming kind of months and years. But obviously, what we want to see is like continued growth in the conversations and communities that happen that like meet and discuss their interest on the platform. And so I think for us and the team working on the API, that's a very similar goal, right? Like really, how can we enable that to happen and make sure we have creators, brands that really create content that is engaging and also get the opportunity again to drive conversation, engage in the replies and so on. So that's kind of what we are focused on essentially.
Okay, that makes a lot of
But the
sense.
second part of that question, like I think I might have answered just a part of the question, but
Oh goodness, now it's okay. And what would you like to see from developers?
yeah, I mean anything that enables that essentially
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah, I think you covered it. Okay. So we are pushing up against time, and I'm terrified that the webinar is going to kick us out and that we'll just be left hanging. So if you do have any more questions, please do. I think probably the best thing to do would be to tag @Buffer on Threads, and then we can perhaps, Etienne, get some answers from you that way, if that is okay. I don't want to keep you from your celebrations any longer. My turn for a shameless plug. So Buffer launched support for Threads a week or two ago, and we've been so excited to see the uptake on the connection. So that basically means you can schedule your threads, you can get analytics for your threads, you can cross-post your threads. And to Etienne's point a little bit earlier about cross-posting threads, you have the ability to edit the content. So if I want to share, so you can tweak it for each platform. So if I want to share something on Instagram, I can tweak that post slightly and share it to Threads at the same time, or any other platform that Buffer supports. So it's really exciting to see. And something that I have seen amazing success with is post duplication. So I can go back in my calendar and I can duplicate posts from Instagram, TikTok, wherever they may have been published, and then repost them to Threads, obviously, with a bit of tweaking, which has been really great in filling up my content calendar. So if you have any questions about that as well, do head over to @Buffer on Threads, and we will have answers. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, Etienne, and taking a break from your celebrations. I hope you enjoy the rest of them. And I hope everybody in the chat got what they were looking for from this webinar. Thanks, everybody.
So much.